All right. Just finished sharing that out. Good morning, Charlena.
Good morning, Cara. How are you?
I am so much better. Listen, no one noticed because we're not famous and not trying to be. But I was really sick last week,
Yeah.
and I'm sad about it because now when I get sick, I just feel like you knew better and you didn't do better. My immune system should be stronger, and it used to be. So it's a wake up call of sorts.
Well, I will tell you this as a nurse, one of the most important things you can do in terms of avoiding all of the communicable diseases that are going around, flu, COVID, RSV, all of that, in addition to having a strong immune system, is washing your hands.
Yeah,
Washing your hands.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter brought this germ in and she gave it to me. And then Zion was just kept coming in my room. And I'm like, I don't want to take care of you, son. Get out. And he just kept coming in. And then he caught it Monday night. I shared it on Facebook, the most hilarious messages from him. He sent me a message at
I
midnight.
saw that. I saw.
He's like, I'm just letting you know, my throat stuff's feeling weird. I might not be up in the morning, 5:30. Update.
I saw that.
Funny. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere today, blah, blah, blah. So, but he got through it much faster because I went to the health food store and they gave me this killer stuff. He couldn't go to school, but he doesn't have the runny nose. Like I'm still, fit. My nasally tone is still there. And it's
Okay.
been over a week because I didn't have the tools that I usually have.
Mhm.
And I'm the only one that knows this information. So when I get sick, I'm on my own, and it
Okay.
revealed some things in the family as well. And I ended up just having conversations with my mother about how we should know how to take care of each other,
Mhm.
and this is going to make for a great episode one day because I told her, that no one is nurturing me. And instead of her saying, how can I support you? She said, no one ever nurtures me either. No one's ever nurtured me
Mm.
either. It just immediately went off to this place that made me think, as a mom, that would not be my response. As a mom, your natural thing should be, how can I help you? Or let me get you something. And she does little things here and there, but she has no intrinsic desire to say, oh, she said homemade is best. Let me Google a recipe and make her a soup. Like it's fascinating to me. But what I'm thankful for, Charlena, is that I've come so far in my healing. When I say it's fascinating to me, I genuinely approach it with fascination, not judgment, not anger, not bitterness. It's just, I just look at my maternal lineage and say, I wonder where this started. Like, I'm very curious.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
but your tip did help because as soon as this is going to sound terrible because I didn't want him to get sick, but as soon as Zion got sick, I was like, "Oh, Charlena said she got a tray. I'm going to do a tray." I was like, I didn't tell you that, but I immediately thought about that. And
Oh, when I told you what my
yes,
mom used
I
to do
want
when
you to.
I was okay, so
I'm
I
gonna
need
tell
to
you what
share
I
that.
did. I want you to
Okay,
share that. I want you to share it with all the
okay,
detail that
okay,
um that you gave me because I
okay.
couldn't remember everything, but I was like, I am not gonna text her or call her on this and show that I didn't capture every single thing she said. And so I just gave him a tray. I had water on there. I had juice on there. I had an orange. I moved. I didn't have, I couldn't push the TV in his room. I could do all that. I let him come down and spend the daytime in my sanctuary space with the TV and the remote, and I had him fully set up there. I didn't pay attention 100% all day long like I needed to, perhaps, but I definitely added a special touch there. And if I had to do it again, like especially if all my kids were little, I would add some fresh flowers, just a small little thing of fresh
Yeah,
flowers on there
yeah,
because I just feel like
yeah.
it adds so much to the healing.
Oh,
I want you to tell everybody in detail what your mom used to do when you were sick because I loved it and I want every mom that's still at home.
so and I didn't share this with you, and I need to share it because it puts it in context. So my mother lost her mother when my mother was like 12 years old. Okay, so that gives you some context. But when I would get sick, I remember, and this was more, I can remember like fourth and fifth grade specifically, when I would get sick, my mother, she she would, in my room, I'd have my little box of Kleenex. She would,
Next.
with a safety pin, she would fold down the edges of a brown paper bag. She would pin it to the side of my bed so that I could put my little snot rags in the
Oh my
trash.
gosh, I didn't know that. Okay, the bag was for the snot rags.
Yes, for the Kleenex. And then she would, of course, she'd have all my little stuff like my juice and all that kind of stuff and my medicine, the cough syrup and all of that. But then she would take Vicks and she would rub it under my nose and she would rub it on my chest. And then she would put so this was back in the 70s. So yeah, 70s. She would take the little TV that she had in her room and she would put it in my room so I could watch TV. And then she would like go to the store and she'd buy me a special little toy or maybe a coloring book or something. So it was just a whole vibe of love and healing and mothering that she would do for me whenever I would get sick. And, so I know I didn't share the fact that she had lost her mom when she was young, but that just says so much to me because I don't know if her mom did that for her. So my mom is deceased. She passed when I was 26. So I can't ask her, but I don't know if her mom did that for her. But the fact that she lost her mom at such a young age, but she was still able to mother me in that way when I got sick, and I love that about her. So of course, when my daughter would get sick, I would do the same thing, and I think it's beautiful. It's just a
Mm-mm.
beautiful way of nurturing your child when they're vulnerable that way.
Yeah, or any loved one,
Loved one, yeah.
any loved
Could
one,
be
and
your partner, your spouse, your
yeah.
anybody.
It
Just
could
I
be a
think,
single friend who doesn't like think
right.
like and I think when you go through things, it does make you more aware of other things. Like if I had a single friend, the next time I have a friend who's by themselves, or honestly, if they just have an inattentive spouse, like let's be real, it happens. And so
Mhm.
maybe I'll do, if I have time and feel led, I can definitely take the soup because I have a girlfriend in Memphis who gave me a homemade soup recipe, vegetable soup. And I had to sit at the table and do the chopping. I was so weak. But just, because when you have a cold flu, there's no energy in your body. All the energy is going towards the virus. And so, but that soup was so nourishing and so good. And I thought, who would not appreciate or desire it? Well, this is the point she made. You're going to heal faster when you're loved.
Yeah.
Like,
But it's that energy that you're getting.
mhm.
It's
Yeah,
that
you're getting
positive
that love energy.
energy. And yeah, and it's a very, very powerful energy. I thought of something. So one of my husband's friends, he's a single man and he's having surgery on Monday. And I really like just connected with him. We had him over for dinner and we connected. And so I reached out to him this past week and I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that, I have embraced you. You're in my village now. And so, when you have this surgery on Monday, I want to be involved. And I don't know what's going on with your connection, but sometimes we see the little circle, you're going in and out. This is for you, Cara. So
Oh
I
no,
don't know.
I'm fine. The dog is outside and I need Zion to go get him. So I tried to cover my camera and mute myself very
Okay,
quickly so I could
gotcha.
yell.
It's
I'm listening
okay.
to you.
Just checking. Okay. And so anyway, I reached out to him and he has a cousin who's coming in to take care of him. And so I told him, well, hey, put us all on a text string together so that Lewis and I can be updated on what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And he just talked about how he appreciated that. And it made me, in this conversation that we're having now, we can support people that we know and love when they're going through physically any sort of challenging time. We can take care of them when they're sick. And it reminded me of years ago when I had my hysterectomy. One of my work colleagues, she sent me. So this was back in 2012. So the technology was different, but she sent me all of this music to play
Mm,
while I was recuperating from this major surgery. And it just reminded me, I think I'm going to do that for this friend. But there are ways that we can show up for people when physically we're not there that how we can aid in in their healing process. So
mm.
whether it's your kid who's sick, your spouse that has a cold, we can be there for others.
That is that's so true. There's so many different ways to show love. And for me as a person who has struggled with self-absorption, I'm just going to be honest, I that has been a struggle for me, and if more people would just come to that awareness within themselves that they struggle with kind of over centering of themselves, then that's the only way you can cure it. I have to be intentional about the friends I have, almost to a place, Charlena, where I wish I could just document it all, which is part of what I'm doing for our trip next year. This friend, their love language is this. This person loves a phone call. This person would love to get something in the mail. This person loves gifts, little gifts of any kind. And so that we can really tailor those sisterhoods, that means so much to you.
Mhm.
Show them that you mean it, so that when we're all gone, whatever the timing may be, you don't have any regrets. Nothing
Right.
is missing. Nothing was left behind.
Exactly.
And so that will be in one of our future episodes. I'm finally getting closer to securing her. We'll talk about like friendship restoration. And I think we're going to
Mhm.
have so much to share on that. Let's do
You,
our drinks. And we
okay.
have our guest is waiting in the wings. And I actually need to
So
grab
is he able to hear us?
I can you nod your head if you can hear us? Yeah, he can hear us. I thought he could.
Hey.
I thought, hello, hello. Look, Charlene, we might be getting a little fancier. Okay. But before I left his bio info on my phone, which I put on the
Okay.
charger. So I'm gonna go and get that while you
Okay.
share your beverage of the day,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
I'll share mine, and then we'll bring
So,
him.
okay, just so you know, I'm not a techie girl, but every now and then this little circle you'll pop off the screen and it's like it's buffering. So I don't know what's going on at your house or with your connection. It's just a little tiny kind of buffering thing. You'll go off the screen, the little circle, and then you come back on.
I
So
wonder if Lauren is seeing that too. Yeah, can you give a thumbs up if mine connection is clear, or thumbs down if it's not, Lauren?
it's
Oh,
going in and out.
he said it's fine. It might be
Oh,
your system.
okay, maybe it is. Might
I
be
don't,
me. Okay.
I don't know. Okay. I'm gonna mute and go get the phone with his info.
Okay, so if you're joining us for the first time, one thing you may not know is that Cara and I always have a beverage of choice that we share. And so mine is a peach mimosa. I don't know if I can technically call it a peach mimosa because it's 1/3 Prosecco and 2/3 peach juice. So I'm the person that likes a little bit of alcohol with my juice for my mimosa. Um, so that is my juice, my drink for the morning. And Cara is usually very healthy. My beverages are not healthy. She usually has some water with her. I never have water. So what are you drinking today, Ms. Cara?
You also didn't mention that I usually have too many beverages. Okay. And I thought today I was gonna do better. I really did. But I think this is just who I am as a person. I can't help it. And so I have my coffee. I'd intended to have my coffee done by now. So that didn't happen. So I still have that with some very delicious creamer. There's nothing added to it. And then yes, I have my water in a new water bottle that I got from a black owned herb shop nearby with some obsidian crystals in the bottom for protection. I really needed this last week and it was wonderful. I also have water blessing stickers on here that I get from the spiritofwater.com. This one says new money vision. This one says gratitude. And then this one says divine light.
Okay.
Um, and so I even went super woo woo and charged this overnight in the under the moon with water in it. When I first brought it home, he suggested that, and I did it. And I don't know. Listen, we need everything we can get these next 4 years, which is everything we're going to talk about too.
Hmm.
And then my last beverage is Pop, mimosa. Okay. This is
Bravo.
mango juice that I had in the
Bravo.
fridge. And look, I want you all to notice that she's cheering for the alcohol. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, because you know what? I only do, this is one thing I've learned from Charlena, celebrating every day in every way, everywhere you are. Because I only do mimosas when I'm out to brunch. It's weird. I don't think about it at all at home. But when I'm at brunch, which apparently we're brunch, Atlanta especially, this is a brunch city. I mean, I didn't know it until somebody else told me all that you talk about brunch a lot. I'm so oh, we do brunch a lot. But anyway, when I'm out to brunch, I have to have it. I would never go somewhere where they weren't going to have it. But at home, I just don't think about it. And so I'm going to
Mhm.
pop this open and say cheers. Thank you for the suggestion to get the small bottles too, because
Mhm.
that has made a big difference.
Yeah.
All right. So where's your beverage? Because you know I stepped away.
It's a peach, but mine is a grande.
I
Peach
love those.
mimosa.
Okay. I love
Yeah.
those glasses. Cheers.
Cheers, darling.
Mm. All right.
Hey, let's get to it.
Let's get to it. So, we have a special guest today, guys. His name is Lorne Steedley. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't have a real bio. Okay. So, I'm just going to read a little bit of what you shared, and then Lauren can come on and fix it. Um, the Chattanooga,
Okay.
I don't think I pronounced that right.
You didn't Chattanooga.
Chattanooga.
Chattanooga. Okay.
Yeah, the
Going over.
Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce named Lorne Steedley, MS, MA, as Vice President, Diversity and Inclusion. This was some of the previous information. It's an article on his position in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Lauren is just here today to really talk to us about his perspective, and I think kind of how we can prepare for the next 4 years. Our goal is to obviously keep it positive, but do whatever we can to make sure that we thrive. That's my focus. Make sure that you thrive. Either you're going to survive or you're going to thrive. And we really want to thrive these next 4 years. But there are complex issues and things at hand. And so I'm going to bring Lauren in right now to correct me on everything. I didn't have enough coffee, Charlene. I can't. It's like I can't. All of my words are getting stuck. Let's bring Lauren right now and let him do the talking.
Hey,
Hey.
good morning, ladies. How are
Hey,
you?
good morning. Oh my gosh. Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
Did
So I
Charlene tell you to bring a beverage?
Well, when you guys start doing that, I said, let me run out and get my water and bring it back.
okay.
So,
See, Charlena, he's got water as well.
oh yeah,
I feel
man.
horrible.
Just
So
trying to.
before Lauren starts, I just have to share a little bit about him and why I asked him to join us today. Obviously,
On the intro.
because of his background, but I had shared with Cara about Lauren. There are probably about 4 or 5 men that I consider to be just have just brilliant minds, and Lauren is one of those people. And when this all of this DEI, the attack on DEI started, um, I thought of him because I was aware of his background. And so I reached out to him just, in concern, like, hey, what's going on? How are you? How is this going to impact you? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, again, we just had another extremely stimulating and informing conversation. And I was like, hey, would you be willing to come and join us? We're not this big platform, but, you just never know where the message may go. And so Lauren, I don't think we've seen each other like
I
face to
know.
face like this in probably 15. I didn't even do the math, but
Yeah, I
maybe it's
know.
been
I
about
know.
15 years. And it is
Yeah.
so good to see you. Thank you for
Same
coming.
here. Same here.
So I wanted to lead with that.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I just sort of opening up, just by way of just sort of the background. I was just thinking about what I would share, and it's all about this orientation, not only just the political kind of labeling that's going on with this. So, just by way of this sort of level setting, one of my backgrounds or one of my masters is in sociology, so I kind of look through things through that lens. And so, when you think about DEI and just the way it's been, the labeling has been co-opted, you got to go back in many ways, a lot of folks, you saw this escalation in what we call chief diversity offices. A lot of that happened after George Floyd. So you see this large ramp up of that. But you also got to remember this from a sociological lens. This is all about identity. So it's all about race. It's all about power. It's about gender, etc. And unfortunately, it gets marginalized and it's gotten co-opted. And so what it really is, it's always been about full participation. And so here's some pathways, and we've had historically, we've done this in different ebbs and flows in terms of access and opportunity. And then at the same time, you got folks, as soon as some of these practices and policies have been put in place, people sort of result back. And that's happened here again, because again, it got weaponized. And even when I first came on the Chattanooga, I remember thinking, like at the time, because I came in November, shortly after Biden was elected, and I remember being conscious about the challenge I would see if it was a second term of the previous administration, which is now the current administration, because of the nature of the environment, not just the fact that in certain pockets in the country, diversity is a little bit more common. If nothing else, it's racially, you just have a little bit more familiarity that allows you to learn a little bit more about culture, a little bit more about sort of the interaction and engagement. And then you talk a little bit more about why it's so significant. And so in my work, I purposely framed it around the idea of productivity and profit, because we were at a chamber and it was about economic participation. So I had to do that for several reasons. One, I thought, it was digestible. And I also had to identify would-be allies. So the allies are other members within the corporate community who needed me as much as I needed them to present information that helped bolster the case on why it was important. Mm-hmm. And then within that, you started unpacking that you have to talk about it from the point of view of just how broad it really is. So it's not just about race, because 75% of all chief diversity officers are white females. Mm-hmm. So there's a mischaracterization of who it is and who it impacts. And that sometimes I think, again, it's a trigger. So folks resist that because they've seen this elevation or elevation of practices to aid, regardless of how you package it. And they have a resentment because they don't have a level of engagement with folks who represent these various groups. So what I tried to do in Chattanooga was just to really present it more like, let's look not only, yes, it has a racial component, but also too, more broadly, you're also looking at issues of neurodiversity. You're looking at disabilities. You're talking about veterans. You're talking about women, other folks of color. And it's all about this globalism too. So you're talking about global diversity. So in global diversity, you got probably about 74 to 76% of all of the world's population is of color. So, and that's principally Asian and African. So by 2050, it's going to get up to it's going to be 80%. So the reason I just tried to elevate that particular point was that's all about your customers, your products, your services, logistics, all that's going to play in. So cultural competency is going to be critical to your success or your failure. So in some ways, this recent kind of evolution of propaganda runs counter. So I would travel back and forth to South Africa, and at the time, you would go in and if you step off the curb, you're not looking in the right direction, you get nailed because you're not looking in the right direction.
Right.
So you have to be conscious of that. So it's almost the same situation where we are right now. Some of the decisions that are being made, it's going to have economic consequences. And I only frame it in that way because I think that's how people can receive the message. Now, what do we sort of do in the next 4 years? I think much of it is, I don't think in terms of 4, I think in terms of 2 years, because you can have midterm elections. So the notion is, and it's sort of a historical narrative for me, is like, look at the practices that have been applied that are impactful. You've seen a few of them when folks are deciding to roll back the DEI practices on the corporate side, then you have the right to do that, but you have a right not to have access to my money. So these looking at a lot of boycotts taking place, and that's going to continue. And what I find fascinating about that, if you play it right, then the companies that are choosing to take on those policies, I think in terms of the marketplace, their stocks have been adversely affected versus places like Costco, you've seen their prices go up. So there's an economic benefit. And, if I'm a betting man, I'm putting my money and my activism behind those companies that choose to toe the line. And then you got larger corporations like NFL, there's like, NFL doesn't really have a choice. So they had to embrace the policy because, you got the vast majority of the population of their employees are African-American. So if you're talking about exclusion, and they still have some major challenges around coaching, I think that they recognize that the consequences could be dire for them to not. So those are some of the things I think short term on the political space. It's the 2 years. It's about the boycotts. It's about the activism. It's about voter participation. And it's not, it's got to be done locally. So everything from dog catcher to county councilor to House member to House Senate, you just got to be actively engaged. And that starts today. And if you want to see those kind of changes occur, then you have to be boots on the ground. And so I think that's part of on the political side. And what you're going to see is a lot of the continuation of every day, something else more shock and awe. But I also think at the same time, you got House and Senate members who, regardless of party, they have a level of consciousness about understanding what their role and responsibilities are to the American people. That's just my interpretation and my hopes that they're that way. And then I think that we have practices, and I can't speak today, practices in place that also said we're going to check and balance. It's just not one person running over people and is implementing a lot of these changes. So with that, I'll stop. I'm sorry if I was all over the place, but yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. So let me ask you this, for the average person out there that doesn't really know how DEI impacts the average person, can you give us some of the practical applications of how DEI policies benefit people that we don't even realize that this benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about the acknowledgement. It's about certain policies and practices. You're talking about considerations, and when we say that, people kind of look at it very negative. But you're talking about considerations that amplify and support, everything, as I mentioned before, neurodiverse employees. I mean, there's stats, there are reports that talk about how valuable neurodiverse employees are to organizations. And then this policy now of folks being remote. So as a remote worker, neurodiverse workers, it works better for them. They can be in their home office, they can be productive, and stats show that they have been. So that's one, I would say, and that's a small segment of the population. But I think that the bigger point and how it impacts people on the day-to-day is intended to be inclusive in an effort to sort of elevate. And so the notion of this cultural competency, at least for where I sit, I think it provides a greater opportunity to expand economic participation. So some of these practices and considerations around training, development, looking a little bit more close on the significance of cultural competency, particularly as the world is getting much more global. So I think the knowledge, understanding of how you go about interaction, understanding a little culturally of some of the workers and individuals you're dealing with, expands your understanding of how you go about doing your work, and you can do a little bit more effectively and efficiently.
So if I'm the average person, let's say I'm a woman and I just had a baby, right? And I just had a baby. So what are some of the principles or some of the policies that a company would have that may have been influenced by DEI initiatives that would impact me as this woman who just had a baby? I'm a professional who just had a baby.
Yeah, I think some of the things in terms of like leave and practices of leave, understanding some of the dynamics of being a parent, I think that there's a sort of a broader tent of inclusivity because we understand and recognize that that is significant. I think definitely in the United States, given a little bit more consideration of these leave practices and family leave practices, and how that's really expanded in the last several years in a way that is a little bit more about inclusivity, is about equity, is about diversity in a way that gives consideration in ways in which you previously haven't had. And so I think that you're looking at like certain places in the world, leave practices is a family situation, but only certain corporations also now incorporate the father as well as the mother. So I think in this space, there's been some review and consideration. And so for a woman who is a professional who's recently had a child, I think in the last 4 or 5 years or so, you've seen more attentive efforts, more real efforts to make that happen, supportive. And I think that's the other piece of this.
So whether it comes to like her being able to remove herself to go and pump milk.
Right. Absolutely. Some of those things, I think they preceded, because this is the other kind of, I think, misperception about DEI. It's been around for longer than George Floyd. It precedes that, but you saw escalation in that. So even before that, there were a lot of birthing stations and breastfeeding and some of this other stuff for milk and stuff. So I think there was always this beginning, but it was just adding and providing a level of momentum and support over the last several years. You made it a little bit more prominent. Now with the remote work, because of unfortunately with COVID, then there's other considerations in terms of like how you can have that home office and how your corporations can be supported. And I think one of the things that gets left out of the DEI conversation is belonging, and that's critical because now you try to look at the whole person, you try to look at the whole lived experience, and it's complementary to the work life. So they talk a lot more about work-life balance and what's involved with that. So I would say that there's more of these practices to support each and every segment of our workforce. And then there are practices and also services that perhaps didn't exist 10 years ago to make the person the whole person. And it's all a little bit more rooted. And this goes hand in glove with retention. It's about belonging, making people feel a part of a corporation. So it's about retention. It's about that person growing in the organization and not seen as a one-off. Because I think the other side of this, and this is a bigger thing for me, is like the bias that comes with those hiring managers. The hiring managers dictate, who comes into the organizations, but also how they're paid, how they're promoted. And then if folks come into an organization, and it's a window test, right? I mean, I've gone to see, sort of looked at organizations, and the first thing I checked is their board of trustees, who they look like, board of directors, who they look like, what's the representation? And if it's one person of color, I'm like, I'm inclined to think they're not really sincere. So I'm making decisions based on who is a good fit for me, who wants me to be there, and based on that, who is also invested in my success.
Wow. Well, I tell you, I've taken so many notes over here because you said a lot of really interesting things that I wanted to capture. And I want to go back to what you were talking about initially. Let me first say hi to Christina. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Anyone else, please do comment and say hello. Make sure that you are sharing this episode far and wide here on Facebook or through my YouTube channel. Coach Cara would love to get more eyes, especially on today's episode, but really all of them. So let me see, where can I even go here with this? I love what you said about productivity and profit. Because as somebody who's been in corporate America myself for a zillion years, I have learned, especially with male management, show them the numbers. Don't come with emotion around why something is a great idea. Like my leader lights up if I'm going to tie something to two things: his ego and how something's going to make him look good, or money savings or money making. Because that's something that we can measure. No one can measure feelings. And I think that, not going to go on a tangent about this, but I think the key part that women bring or can bring if we're tapped into ourselves is bringing our heart in, but not in a in your face way, with emotion and tears and things like that, but learn to balance it to soften the energy in a room or experience. But still, if you bring that with some metrics, oh, you can't be stopped,
Exactly.
And so I appreciate your nod to that. I also put a note in the comments about, well, I put a note on my own sheet that some of these businesses are not going to survive this flip-flop behavior that we're seeing.
Right.
I don't know who they are, but when you said that, I hadn't checked stock prices on anything. And I really protect my mental space by looking at something, but not getting too deep.
Sure.
But some of these businesses are not going to survive this, because when you said that stat about where minority presence is going, number one, it explains white male fear. Makes that very crystal. But it also, Lorne, gave me so much hope, because even just before this episode started, I told someone it's like we've been set back so much in just a month. So I want to make sure that we talk about that as well, because I literally just told somebody, I feel like I would move back to the continent in 10 years as my retirement plan. Like, it's exhausting. This fight has been going on since, with our grandparents and all the stories passed on to us. And we felt like we were making so much progress with with more Black pride movements and all of that. And to see this undoing happen at warp speed, it's like, are we really going to dig it out of the mud again? Is this even our home? Should we even be trying to stay here? All of that. So I put that down. I'm going to stop pausing a second, because I know I'm sharing a lot. I think the chaos is intentional. I think we all know that it's intentional. And also, we are not accepting of each other's differences. Like, when people say things like, I'm colorblind, I was raised to be colorblind, I correct them immediately. The goal is not to ignore that I'm Black. It's to accept and appreciate that I'm Black. The goal is not to ignore someone's disability. It's to accept and appreciate their disability and their unique views on things, which is why the part about cultural competency is so important. I talk about that a lot in the work I do. We have to write to that all the time. We'll get questions that ask us, when we're bidding on programs, what is your cultural competency plan? Which essentially, for those who don't know, I do feel like it's important to kind of explain that, but you have to show how competent you are around understanding all of these differences. What plans, programs, processes, etc., do you have in place that show that you have an understanding of a certain unique population? And a lot of it does tend to be focused around language, like how many different languages are your materials available in, and different things like that. But it could even include social determinants of health, like how far someone is from a healthy grocery store, or what is their access to get to the doctor, and things like that. So it's very broad. And I feel like everyone needs a cultural competency awareness in their own lives. I don't have to be friends with all of these diverse people, but I should have enough respect to show grace for the differences that exist between me and someone else, and seek to actually understand them. And that's where the sense of belonging comes into play, right there. And that's how you make someone feel a feeling of belonging, is by not coming at with some preconceived notions of their culture or their disability or whatever, but seeking to understand with compassion.
Absolutely, 100%. And you hit on a lot of good things. And I think when first thing you said, and people have to be conscientious. I'm originally from Columbia, South Carolina, and so I could hear my dad, God rest his soul, my parents in that generation, right, saying things like this, like, why are you surprised? Like, so why are you thinking that these changes wouldn't happen? And you kind of live in this space where you see this progression, so you don't see this kind of change. And then at this stage in my life, I'm like, God, man, if I was younger, I may be able to adapt a little bit more. But the reality is, it doesn't surprise me. But there are a series of things that we've always done that allow folks to be successful and to move forward. Because I think the concern I have is hopelessness, and then this notion of debilitation. Because you can get overwhelmed with this, to think that you don't have a choice, you don't have an option. I talked to a couple of folks after the election, And I purposely dialed myself back a little bit because I anticipated certain things happening. And so I was like, okay, so what's next? Versus I had one friend, she kind of frustrated me. And I said, well, you need to go home and pull the covers over your head for the next 4 years, and the adults are going to come into the room, and this is what we're going to do. And so the mindset is, and we have had practices of this, it's about economic boycotts. It's about, going to every election. This is at least today, it's a democracy. So how do you continue to actively participate? And that's at the ground level. You have to start with the local elections. You got to be energized. You got to show victories, like being an athlete, for lack of a better example. You train. Well, some of you train in Little League and Pop Warner and AAU ball in order to get to D1 college, in order to get to the pros. So in order to get to those larger policy sort of spaces, then you cut your teeth on some of the closer local elections so you can have victory. So I think it's some of that. But I feel you too, because, I've talked to friends about everything from Panama to, Panama's consideration, Ghana, of course. I'm going back and forth myself.
Portugal.
Yeah, it's, going back and forth. Even, South Africa is kind of charged, but I do have a familiarity with it, and I'm going back and forth. And you hit on something too, that global travel, as you guys all know, kind of influences you. It allows you to think about the whole race conversations a little bit differently, because how they see it and how you see it and how you've been conditioned to see it. And one of the most interesting comments that ever was made to me in South Africa by a Zimbabwean, he said, well, Lorne, you're not, I said, I'm African American. He said, well, you're not African. And I was like, huh. So out of my intellectual curiosity, I said, so why is it that you say that? Who am I in your eye? He said, you're an American. And, part of me is like, take that back. So because of the way it's framed, right? Because you're marginalized, you're this and that, you see it through a certain lens. And so, so when people, even other people of color, they see you a distinctive way. And, our codes and norms in the United States, it's a lot different than the codes and norms of in Brazil, for example. I mean, it's similar because there's a lot of things that overlap, but even our interpretation within our own space differs from geography to geography. So it's a lot to kind of take in, but I think we still have an opportunity to do some things here. But I would also say, to your earlier point, you feel a certain way, man. It's like
you feel it.
You can get beat up on, constantly.
Yes. Let me speak to what you said about what he said, calling you an American. Wow. So, anybody who knows me, because I talk about it probably way too much, but I spent half a year living outside of the US. And in the process of doing the research around where to go, it was just much heavier than I expected in a number of different ways. And I learned so much. I learned, first of all, that we don't really have a home as Black Americans, descendants of slaves. Even Caribbean Americans who come here have that home country, even though it's not their original home. They have that tie. We don't. And that has caused so much trauma to us that when we were torn away, it's almost like we all have this mother wound, from being removed, from the motherland. And so, but when you think about going back, one of the things that I noticed, because I lived in Colombia for a while, and there were Afro-Colombians there, and part of it was positive and part of it was not positive. One thing, the first time I went to a Black barbershop there, Afro-Colombians. They spoke all Spanish. I didn't even know there were Black people who spoke Spanish before I went there in 2018. Had no idea. So it's weird to hear them all talking in Spanish. And so we go into the barbershop, $3 haircut, by the way, fantastic cost of living. And they had a picture of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King on the wall in the barbershop. And so I was like, wow. And the barber told me, fumbling in his English, and said, we are so in awe of you, like in awe of our struggle here. However, by the same token, Lorne, it's like they don't see them. Black, in my opinion, if somebody disagrees, fine. Black people who are not from the American soil don't feel this need for all of this unity that we talk about. Like Africa is very tribal. It's this country and that country. And whereas Black Americans think we're all together. We talk about the head nod. We have all these customs and hidden rules and things like that that other cultures don't necessarily have. And so at first I battled feeling really discouraged about that. Like we're the ones, you know. I remember when I was living in Colombia, there was a group of Black Americans who was determined to like bridge this gap. They would hold events all the time with the Afro-Colombians. They wanted to be on the ground there, helping them with their fight in their own country. And then you have some Black Americans who were there that they're not dying in the streets like we are here. Like we didn't really see their oppression is not in a lot of these countries is not as obvious in the Latin countries. It doesn't seem as obvious, but yet they also have almost no representation in government and in culture and any of that kind of stuff, right? And so I noticed how we're doing the fight all the time. And so I went from being discouraged about it to thinking, wait a minute, maybe this is our purpose. Because we did get it out of the mud in America. Maybe we are the nucleus that would support bringing the whole diaspora together globally. Because when we think of Africa, even those of us smart enough to know it's a continent, we still see it as all one thing. And I don't think they even see themselves that way. And so if it's a very lofty goal, but I'm just saying in my vision and dreams, I would love to see indigenous descendants of American slaves driving a global movement, just like Garvey used to talk about and everything, to bring everyone together on a global scale. And I know that's why Ghana is like, come home. They're like, bring these talents back here, help us build our country up, which is a very smart thing to do. So.
Yeah, that's funny. You said a lot there. And I'm going to tell you why. I think some of it too, that people, I get in these conversations, my daughter and I talk about this thing. At the same time, on a global perspective, there are a lot of people who are in those 54 countries that make up the continent, right? And I got a real problem when people, to me, when they say the continent or they say Africa, I think I'm like, so Europe is all one country, you know? So it just, to me, I've tried in the last 10 to 15 years to be more conscientious when I talk about specific countries, because I know every country is different. And I also understood too, in looking at SA, South Africa a little bit more closely, you got 80%, I think, of the population is of Black African. But yet, you know, apartheid did exist. It did happen. So there's certain dynamics post-apartheid because of numerics that have a different kind of influence and impact. And I say that to say one of the things about the US, because of African-American history here in the country, you've had to be an advocate because you were marginalized, and it's kind of numeric in the way in which we go about it, because we talk about democracy and representation and one vote, that type of thing. And then my daughter and I got this conversation about there is a perception that this narrative of what it means to be Black America carries all narratives for Black folks around the world. And then there are Black folks around the world who have a certain level of not resentment, but more of like, I don't think that represents the world. I don't think that represents what it means to be Black, you know? And again, too, this is the caution. There's some byproducts, man, of living in the United States that you're not even aware of as an American. You go places. My daughter at one point was living there, and she still lives there now. She's in Cape Town, and we were talking, and she's like, you know, Dad, you know, you can tell the Americans. I said, how is that at the airport? I said, how's that? They're the loudest. They're the loudest. She was on a flight once. She was going from, I want to say, maybe Egypt or either Ethiopia, going back to Cape Town. I'm going to Joburg. And it was like this, there was a music festival that was going on. So some of the performers were on this flight. And she said, yeah, you can tell it. You know, they were Americans. You know, they're talking over the seats. They're, you know, up. They're kind of loud compared to others. So there is a presence of being in the room, you know, or being present. And I don't think we realize some of the byproducts of being in this country until you step out of it. Because folks, they may speak, at least in that say, maybe speak a little bit more softer. And we are much more like, let me let you know I'm in the room kind of thing. And you're not even aware that you're being that forward because that's all you know. And I think that's the part of it about what your comment is about sort of driving it. One, I think it's about servant leadership. And I did this leadership thing over at the University of Cape Town. And one of the practices we learned is, you don't necessarily always have to respond. I mean, always have to react. Sometimes you respond. It's best to listen more and talk less. And I think that in order to build those kind of coalitions in this space, you would have to adapt a posture of, we know you're the American. Yep, Black, irrelevant, but we know you're an American. We know the characteristics that come along with that. So in some ways, you got to humble yourself a little bit. So as someone said, cultural humility. And I think you start with that. I need to know and understand who you are before I try to tell you what we can do and why this and that. Let me value who you are. Because if I don't, in some ways, I'm no different than what plays out in certain places here. So
and that's an American in general. I found that the Americans were ruder and also felt like they didn't need to know about this other culture. You're in their land, but you don't feel like you need to try to understand or speak the language. I just found all those things to be extremely rude.
Right.
You're on their soil. You're here because you're benefiting in some way.
Right.
But if you can't give back in any other way, you can give back by learning about the culture that you're in, attempting to speak the language instead of criticizing everything that they do.
It's a mindset of entitlement. It's a mindset of arrogance.
Definitely.
That's American.
And even some Black Americans do have it and participate in the othering. But I love what Christina said about this collective post-traumatic slave syndrome. I call it ancestral trauma. I feel it's in our bodies here. We still have trauma. That's why some of the jokes that are all the same about getting on ships and not being over water. And there are things that we are repeating that came from an ancestor repeating certain things and things being carried forward that we don't even understand why we feel this way, why we think this way. And so many people, I don't even think know really how to heal their way out of it. And so what we go into now within this current environment is just panic because we feel like we're going to go back to being powerless all over again.
Yeah, the trauma is real, man. You got that generational trauma that transfers, and that's real. I mean, I don't think that's made up at all. I mean, I'm telling to you like this. There are people. I mean, situations, movies that come up. I don't watch them. I don't watch them. Because I just think it's too real. I know that behind it, that was a real existence. It's not in the movies. It's some fantasy. That's real. And so there's a byproduct of that. I'm like, I'm not trying to consciously allow my subconscious, to take more of that
bring up some repressed ancestral memory. But I think that's why Black Panther was such a big hit. And I'm sad for people who didn't connect with it in that way. But when we saw Wakanda, I will never forget that. And I'm so grateful that I went all in on the theme. My family was dressed up because it was a cultural moment that finally something I did not miss. But that first time when they flew into this new city and they had this special vibranium, we've all felt like we have something special. And I feel like any Black person who is connected to themselves can feel the magic that's within us. And somebody sent me a reel that I can't explain well, so I'm not going to try very hard, but there was a pastor or somebody speaking. They know what's in us. That's why they keep trying to bury it. Because anytime you give us a little bit of light, we dominate. It's not, we don't say that as a bragging thing. There is something deeply special about us. Probably maybe because we are the original race, and so we've just been through hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression on a global level, which has caused all of this division and everything else.
Absolutely, I agree.
What do you got to say, Charlena? I feel it.
I'm soaking it all in. I'm soaking it all in.
Yeah.
And, I'm, when you talk about the exhaustion of, currently where we are, it's the things that we're seeing they're very frightening on multiple levels. Not just from, let's say, racially or, socially, politically, economically, also spiritually as well. And Cara, I'll just share this with you. Cara, we come from a specific religious background that talks about things that are to come. And so it's seeing things that are kind of like, that's interesting. That looks connected. So just it's on so many fronts. And Lorne, I had mentioned this to you about, so what do we, this is where, look, it is what it is. So what do we do? How do we, move forward? I think Cara and I, we did in some of the last episodes talk about what can we do emotionally and what we can do spiritually. We've covered that. But what are some things that we can do, from a practical, from an economic, from just what do we do moving? Because we need to be strategic.
We do. And let me add on to your question, Charlena, because
Mhm.
I was having this conversation yesterday with someone. Do we need a leader? Because it feels like we don't have a leader. These people are talking about boycott, and these people are talking about this. Some people are just doing things. Other people, I think, are waiting for a leader. I kind of feel like Democrats in general, which I don't think a lot of us even maybe consider ourselves Democrats, maybe independents, need to go dark and strategize. Democrats are the feminine party and Republicans are the masculine. That's what's happening. And so we're all emotional and people doing all of this. But I feel like we need to go dark and strategize. In my opinion, things need to be done in the darkness. But
that's Lorne. That was a statement that you made in our conversation about things being done in the darkness. So just
that's what they've been doing. That's what they've been doing. It would have been better if we won in 2020. It would have been better because it would be done by now. But he's had more time to think, strategize, and come up with very heinous things. So what can we do?
So, and I don't want to offend anybody with what I'm about to say. So let me fix it.
No, you should just say it how you feel it. We have about 3 viewers.
I talked to this one person who pulled the covers. I said, pull the covers up over your head. So that, again, there's things which we've done in order to be successful. And you kind of touched on it on the dark side. So one of my observations in the election, right, was the stroll to the polls thing. And I was like, And I was like, well, you don't want to mobilize and trigger people. You want to be stealth as possible. You don't want to, I get it on one level why you want to be public, but at the same time, you got to be strategic. So historically, we've been strategic and you don't need to know what we're doing. You just need to know how we're executing a specific strategy. Like, everything from this mobilization, there is even a body of work called this social movement theory, right? So in that, it's this whole idea of, mobilization being a key factor, direct action being a key factor, communication, how you go about doing that. So that's to your point. So part of this process and what we need to do at this point, I would say it's like a 2-year sort of like a focus. So it's the next 2 years, we know what's going on now. What are the 2 or 3 things that is essential for us? Economic participation is like critical to me because you're in a capitalistic state. So in some ways, how do you protect yourself? If you're too dependent upon other sources and your money's going in one direction, I think that's problematic. I think, 2, look at the policy opportunities. Look at the ways in which you're in a democracy. Look at what you have numerically in certain districts. You've seen victory when you are block voting in a place like Georgia. There's places and spaces, even with the gerrymandering, that you still can be successful. How do you intentionally go about that? I do think there's a lot of education that needs to take place. That's, one point I was looking at this real critically around financial literacy. And the reason why I thought it was essential was because folks spend too much. They're too conspicuous in their spending and not building wealth and not building sort of generational wealth and sort of building stability. And the money goes out as quickly as it can. And people want to demonstrate what wealth looks like versus being very quiet about their wealth accumulation. And then just understand a little bit more that you live in an environment, you're influenced by some of the themes and products all Americans are. But if you're looking at a community and you're trying to say how you basically survive in it, there are a couple of things that you have to do. And I do think economics, I think entrepreneurship is another factor. I do think that we got to look at policy. And I tell you, man, given everything, we got to come up with a way to look at mental health because of what we've been exposed to and what's going to happen going forward. And it's a different generational thing. I think that because of the sort of instant gratification in this social media, the messaging that people inundate themselves with, I think people need to dial back from it a little bit. I think they need to get off a little social a little bit, pick up a book, read for comprehension, read for interpretation, read for critical thinking, and don't look for these snippets off Facebook and elsewhere. And if you don't do that, you're going to lose. We're just going to straight out lose. And I think you have to create, and we got institutions to support it. And don't get me started on what I perceive is the missed opportunity of HBCUs as a community. And I'm not beating up on them or nothing, but I always felt like having gone to PWIs, there's a tremendous opportunity to extend to graduates of PWIs and to support HBCUs. And I think too much we get into us versus them type thing versus we and our. And I'm like, I think there's some ways, some training, some development that I think cultural competency, learning it and understanding and appreciating a little bit more of who we are is in the space in which people are trying to say that you don't exist and you have made no contributions. I think even rooted in that, I was blessed to have taken what they would say now is critical race theory, but it was more of a Black lit class in high school. And I was a junior in high school. And it just really kind of prepared me, like, when stuff was said or questions came up, I was like, yeah, I know better than that. So I can point to Invisible Man. I can point to, Native Son. I can point to, Zora Neale Hurston. I can point to, Why the Cage Bird Sing and understand what the messaging is for me to better understand how the rest of the world, how am I impacted by the world. But I do think that for us strategically, I think we look back at some of the practices that we had before. The institutions may need to be a little different because we are in the space of social media. It may need to be a little bit different. The leader thing, I'm still wrestling with that because at Black Lives Matter a little bit, and I was always going to mind through the lens of social media. Social movement theory. It was like it's no different than a business in this regard. What are we trying to achieve, and how do we know we've been successful? And in the United States and through the civil rights movement, it was through public policy. It was about getting schools. It was about access to resources as a result of those public policies. And then holding government accountable based on those public policies. Did they do it as well as they could have? Absolutely not. But I do think that's one leg of the stool, and the other is economic knowledge, literacy, participation. If you don't do that, that sounds kind of counterintuitive in a capitalistic state to not understand financial literacy and not,
And it's a key. It's definitely a key part. I wrote down everything you said, and I do want to recap it. Not right now, but definitely before we close. But I feel like we need to ground hearts and minds as much as possible, to your point about kind of doing some sort of internal healing, and root out all the grifters, because there's a lot of Black grifters out there, and all it takes is one person to do something in error and people lose faith and hope, so excuse me, it could end up being that we have smaller pockets of this. Truth always recognizes truth. Like, we just met today, Lorne, but I can already see your heart. I can already discern that you're one of the good ones, that sort of thing. And then those people can band together, because there's been so much misinformation really in the history of America, but more recently with the birther incident. And once they started planting the seed of you can't trust anybody else but me, everything else kind of flowed out of that. And so you're never going to be able to save them all. And I do think that whatever groups do come out of this, we have to focus on the 80% that gets it. And not, if Ray Ray wants to stay out there, he doesn't want to read Native Son, he doesn't care about it. We shouldn't spend any energy. This is to everyone who is having unproductive conversations with people who are committed to being basic and mediocre and whoever they are, even if it's not related to this topic. Leave these people alone. Maybe send them put them in the white light with the Lord, whatever it takes. And focus your energy on people who you naturally connect with, because that way you can move with ease instead of spending half the energy that should be spent moving forward is spent trying to convince these other people to change their minds on something. Leave them be. We won't get anywhere fast by trying to drag along people. I would have maybe 1-2 conversations, and if you see you don't vibe like that, leave it alone.
Absolute. And to your point, I think some of these practices, though, to get to that critical mass, you can discern pretty quickly where folks are, and if they're not, and that's okay. That's okay. To your point, it's okay. But you do want to feel as though your time and your effort is having some benefit. So you can easily get quickly frustrated too, because folks want to but you to death. But. And I'm like, I get that. You should do what you think is best. But I do think if you're trying to retain some hope, if you're trying to retain and sort of distance yourself from that debilitation, you want to get around people who are thinking, at least allows you the momentum to move forward, to identify other would-be folks that you can bring into your space who are thinking and moving and feel passionate about how best to move forward. Because everyone wants, and I look at the multi-generational things and I can see a clear, distinct difference in how people.
You just took I was about to pose that question. Where we are and what needs to be done is going to look very different depending on what your age is and where you are in your stage of life. But at the end of the day, regardless of where you are, what your age is, what you think we should do moving forward, the impact is gonna hit us all the same.
Mm-hmm. It is. I do think, because I have some 20-year-olds, God, it's an entertaining conversation. So the way they think about stuff, they're very conscientious. And I think some of that is because they lived on the continent for several years. So their interpretation coming back to the States has been very interesting. And so when I chat with them, they're much more global. They're like, listen, I don't have any hesitation of being in the United States. Mm-hmm. My eldest, she's like, nope, Dad, this is the way things are. I don't have a desire to be back. And then my youngest, at some point, I don't doubt that he'll be living outside the country. So,
how old is your youngest?
21.
Yes, my and the other thing is, because I took my family out of the country for half the year, my daughter, who's now about to turn 23, she was 16 at the time, felt like I was ruining her whole entire life. Who does this to their child during high school? And I kept telling her, this is going to pay off. You will have a much more global mindset. She was just way too Atlanta. Hadn't really, even a little bit of travel here and there does not do it the same way. And so even into her, like 19, 20, she still said, oh, no, I mean, it was fine, but I'm never going to say that was a good thing. Now, especially with these things that are currently happening, she has an innate mindset of, oh, I don't have to live here. And I'm not saying that she should leave or that anyone should leave. I'm just saying that seed, it took a long time to come out. And she told me her boyfriend, who I believe is going to end up being her life partner, he does not even have a passport. And this is so foreign to him. He's very Atlanta as well. But she told me recently that she told him flat out, well, I know I could find a husband in Africa, so if you don't want to get a passport, she was like, he is on it, Mom. He was like, let me get my passport together in case she's serious. You gotta have, these options. But some of that is also tied to the education reading good books. At least with the book, it could stir your soul to say, I want to go see that.
Absolutely.
but we're not reading anymore. We're in a culture where everything is a video. People
In
just want to
30
watch
seconds.
the video. And
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by what you said, because I read Native Son, I read Why the Cage Bird Sings, but it was so long ago. And I think when we were younger, like when I was in my 20s, there were a lot more people reading. Like it was a lot, there was just a lot more of knowledge consumption, true knowledge taking place. And nowadays, people are like super lazy. We've been brought into this microwave generation. I don't want, why would I sit all day reading this book and have, you have to concentrate to read.
Right.
Your
Right.
mind has to draw pictures around what you're seeing. But they just want to skip through that, to the microwave of, I'm going to watch what Lorne said. Listen, watch Lorne on video, talk about this amazing book. And man, don't let me go on a tangent, Lord. But there's so many ties to this, even spiritually. Instead of going to the source yourself, you're just going to listen to everything the pastor said. It's just all of our conditioning is around
Right.
not getting information for ourselves, not trusting ourselves enough that I can discern this information for myself without needing Lorne to break it down and explain it to me, and growing your brain cells, regenerating them to have some curiosity around some of that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think that's how we've been programmed. I think that's very, very intentional, because the more knowledge that you have, I mean, I think knowledge leads to freedom. And the more knowledge that you have, the more that you're aware of options, opportunities. You have the ability to strategize. And you talk about this microwave culture that we live in, I think is really designed to keep us in bondage and to keep us controlled.
Yeah. I was just wanted to add this is about the reading thing. So I was watching Netflix, and I think they just put Different World on, which I thought was like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But what caught me was there was a couple of scenes, and it never failed, right? Because it's a college campus and this precedes smartphones. All the scenes where you see kids reading books. And it was so much so, I was like, wow, yeah, no phones. So you're sitting there, you're preparing for exams, of course, but in this very simplistic way. This is how you obtain knowledge. And it's about critical thinking. It is about liberal arts. And think about this, in the last 4 or 5 years, because of the high cost of education, how people have been much more critical about the value of liberal arts. And liberal arts teaches how to process, how to think, communicate, because it's written word, articulate based on what you're learning. So it's also verbal communications as well. And so it's just, it's like you look at these things and it's so valuable. At the same time, people want to dismiss it because they perceive it as just a microwave. It's like, well, I'm going to spend my valuable time reading a book when I can, and I'm not saying I got anything about bad about books on tape. I'll even take books on tape versus, this interpretation of what was said to me or what the book means. But that's Lorne Steedley's approach. That's Lorne Steedley's interpretation. You can read the same book, and you should, and you can have a totally different takeaway, as you should. But I don't know if I think that's encouraged or nurtured as much as it needs to be. It's critical.
And you know what, Lorne? What you just said in an indirect way made me think about these 5 points right here. Everyone should cultivate this within themselves. So let me slow down and try to get this right. If we were agreed that we should strategize and analyze and do things quietly, the most secretive attack would be to focus on these things and not even talk about what they're doing anymore. Not talk about it, not think about it, but get ourselves together as a people, because we shouldn't even be talking about it or strategizing anything specific until we have done these things, until we have more economic power, until we are focused on education and educating our own children. If they don't want to put it in the school system, fine. Can we create small groups? No one's going to care. That's the thing. As long as we're not talking about them, they're not going to see it as dangerous at all. right? As long as we can, if we're focusing on education and I'm listening to you thinking, my son is not interested in this, but what can I do to motivate him to start a summer reading or something where I say, I know this is going to be hard to digest, son, you know, you're 14 years old, but start planting those seeds now, right? So that he starts getting this information, grounding and understanding within himself, getting the financial literacy and grounding our hearts and minds in the truth, protecting our mental health. What if we just started doing these things? And then it would naturally, organically get to a place where we're more of one mind, we have more power, we're smarter, and then we say, okay, let's move forward in action.
I agree. But I will tell you, and there's no particular order to this,
right?
But I can't tell you that's, and particularly coming out of the pandemic, this mental health thing is like critical. It's critical. And in addition to this, the trauma is critical because just going forward, man, how we see each other, the crime and the violence and the manifestation, even the kind of, and this has been at least my observation in the last 10 years, it's crazy just how we attack one another from a gender perspective and expectations from an economic perspective. And we allow the economic expectations to dictate happiness and fulfillment. And I'm like, I don't know, you can give a person, or you can have all the money in the world, doesn't necessarily make you happy. But are you trying to look at something that is a tangible quality relationship? That's another topic for another day. Or is it about access? I'm just trying to get the monetary benefits so I can exist. Definitely thinking about Atlanta. I can exist in a very conspicuous way, you know? And there was another great book. It was called Black Bourgeoisie. I think it was E. Franklin Frazier wrote that one. And he talked about this conspicuousness. And again, the trauma is that we purchase certain things to distance ourselves from the perception of poverty. But poverty has a manifestation that is psychological. And so it hits different. You know, what was the guy?
I wish you could slow down and say that again.
It just came.
Distance ourselves from poverty.
Right, but from an identity perspective.
Say that again so I can write that down.
I wish I could. I don't know what I said. But it's like the identity thing. It's like, again, so poverty hits people different. And some of that historical narrative, and then there's some of its regionalism too, because you're talking about agrarian states like the Southeast. And so people, to distance themselves, people want to feel as though they're being successful. And then there's particular pathways of how people in the market makes that possible. So I can buy clothes, I can do this, I can do that, but I can't get access to capital to build a business. If I'm trying to show that I'm wealthy, and I'm trying to show that I'm building self-worth in a capitalistic state, then it's probably less about, I'm gonna date myself and I say this because only maybe one or two people understand this. And that's going to be like when a deuce and a quarter was what it was about. You know, to even say that, you have to know what a deuce and a quarter is. You know, that's an Electra 225. It used to be built by Buick. You know, so but people were more inclined to want to look at that. Now it's Mercedes, now it's the Bentleys. You know, but is it really, or is it about me retaining my capital? You know, is it about me growing my wealth and being inconspicuous of that? Is it really about me posting, living my best life because I'm someplace else throwing all this money away? Or am I being conscientious about generational wealth? But that's learned behavior, right? But instead, I want to distance myself because I got that government job so I can do these couple of things and I'm going to demonstrate based on typical stuff, home ownership, etc. But why is it disproportionately I'm buying the high-end stuff? I can, but maybe I'll need to buy it at the rate that disproportionately I find that we are conspicuous. You know?
Ugh, that is such a powerful point because I don't feel anyway like I have that issue for the reasons that you said. Like I'm not a flossy person. I don't have enough style to be flossy, but I have had to come to grips with the fact that I hate putting things back at the store. Like now my mother, for what she thinks it's fun to have all this stuff in the cart and then take it out when she gets to the checkout. I feel poor if I have to tell the cashier, "Ooh, take that off." and I've had to do my own internal mind work to say, either I'm going to tell myself I'm choosing not to have that. It's not that I can't afford it or whatever, but I'm choosing to reward myself by having a bigger bank balance or more savings. Like I've had to channel that somewhere because I really do have that struggle. It's like if I put something back, I'm saying I can't afford it. And if I'm saying I can't afford it, then I'm a failure. And then my terrible go-to argument has always been, hey, I went to college, like that's why I went to school. So I
I
can get what I
deserve it.
want. Yeah, I deserve it. I work
Right.
hard, and
Right.
whatever the root is of it, you guys, you're never going to get to a better place financially until you can reward yourself in different ways. And
Right.
it is an ongoing struggle for me to pay attention to my money and say, I'm in charge.
Right.
Homeless is not in charge of my wallet or wherever, which I can't even go there anymore. We can't shop nowhere, y'all.
Well, I mean, that's one of the benefits of this whole boycott situation. You keep your money in your pocket. But again, it's a learned behavior. And I've learned this about myself. And this is like we take ourselves way so serious and we think with this, we generate all this, this sort of like our revolution or it's how we circle the moon and the sun and the suns and the stars. But at the end of the day, man, most people don't care. They don't care about what you do. They don't care about what you spend. They don't care about what you look like. They don't really care. Because if you kind of get into that space, it kind of levels things out. So you know what? So what? I'm putting stuff back at the counter. These people don't know me from a rock. They could care less. Mm-hmm. If they have certain stereotypes, let them have it. I'm trying to work and be the best that I can be. And I can
tell myself, ooh, if I put this back here, I can put $10 more in my savings. I'm treating myself over here instead, and it's nobody's business. But yeah, I never wanted to look like I can't afford anything.
Right.
And that shows that I care what this cashier thinks. And if I wanted to be haughty, clearly I'm doing better. You know what I mean? So who am I really?
Yeah. And that's why I got into this financial literacy stuff years ago. And I wish we were where we are now back then, because I could, I'll be a household name. But it's one of those things that I remember talking to this young group of kids before about this literacy thing. And I said, well, what happens with your money? This person said to me, what do you do? Young person said, what do you do with money if you don't spend it? And I'm like, that's the point. That's the point.
Wow.
That's the point. It's what are the pathways? There's different, dude. You get
wow, that was such an impactful question.
Say it again.
Oh my
God. What do you do with money if you don't spend it? This kid had a summer intern position, and we were talking, and because I started talking and really breaking it down, where these products that are made and built and made outside your community, they're pretty much inexpensive, whereas you pay something, $10, $12 for something that probably took $2 or $3 to make. Why do you think that is? And just get people to think a little bit more critically about their consumption, and then making some different choices.
Can I add one thing to that, Lorne?
Sure.
I also think that I'm just listening to this phrase from my mother. This is part of my financial trauma. Is she loves to say you deserve it, but then there's also this scarcity lack mentality, which we don't even have time to go there today because we're about to move into closing thoughts. But the other part of it is like she's always lived with this mindset of I might not even be here in 10 years. Why would I save for that? And I feel like with a lot of our population who doesn't have a sense of longevity of life and permanency, if I go to my 20-something-year-old daughter and I say, if you start doing X, Y, and Z now, in 30 years, you can retire at 50. I think a lot of our young people don't see 30 years into the future for themselves.
Right.
So that's why I keep saying there's a root issue that needs to be solved with grounded and visualizing yourself having an abundant life so that you are thinking about your 50-year-old self when you're 20. And because we are not used to permanence and we think that we might not be here in 5 years, I do think that is another part of why they have a hard time saving, investing for the future, because I'm trying to live right now. Tomorrow's not promised.
Right. And that's fact. But I think at the same time, and I'm quite sure we're on the same page with this, I think some of it is you got to understand the instruments that lead you to believe that all you have is today. Mm-hmm. So even when I look at movies anymore, if I see certain images, if I see certain themes, and it's us, I don't watch it. I don't watch it. You know, it could be some of my favorite actors. I don't watch it. And it goes back to your
feed it.
Right. And it gets into your head. And so to your point about why Wakanda, it was refreshing there. So my thoughts are, well, don't I want to see more like that? Even if it's fictitious and in my head, and I can allow myself to actualize it, right? Versus living a narrative that is destructive and doesn't have my best of intent. And to your point, I can't see myself in my 50s because everything I see suggests that I'm under, and I'm not saying that this stuff isn't real. Of course it's real. But if I also subject myself to more and more of it, because even with the Netflix and the what is it? I guess Amazon. Over time, there's certain movies based on the movies you select. Then they start triggering you for other movies, and I'm like, I look at it anymore. I'm like,
one thing we open, all this other stuff starts showing up.
Exactly, and I'm saying, well, why is it? I purposely don't look for movies like this. I look at the soapy romantic comedies, something light, something soft, not crazy. Because it's entertainment, right? So I don't want to be traumatized again in the entertainment. That's counterintuitive, you know? So I was like, shit, I don't watch it anymore. So I think some of that too is understanding you have choice. That's the word. You have a lot more choice than people think they do. So this exercising the power of choice, I think, you know?
That's good. Well, we gotta close out.
I know, I'm sorry.
No apologies needed.
No apologies. I'm closing by adding this strawberry. I forgot to show you this, Charleena, to my. I had a strawberry, so I've added that to my mimosa. And I'm going to do our closing exercise. But Lorne, I want you to land the plane. Like if you had to name something, everybody's heard all this information. It's been amazing. Listen, y'all, you may need to come back through this episode and take some notes on a couple things, because I would ask, as a coach or a friend or whoever, just to try one thing. What is one thing that you heard today that you can implement moving forward, so that you gave this time up for a reason? I don't care if you're watching because you're a friend of mine or a friend of Charlena's or whoever, you still are in this space with us, and there's an assignment for you. So I would encourage you to think about that thing, write it down, and really just spend some time absorbing. It could be that God brought you to this space. So what is it that you needed to hear? What is your assignment? What are you going to do differently? And then how can you kind of keep yourself accountable to that? And Lorne, and let's go to Charleena first, and then we'll go to Lorne. Charleena, closing comments.
So I just want to thank you, Lorne, for joining us today. Cara is she's the voice. She's the one that talks the most, and I'm here to provide some balance. But and really, we decided to do this because we have these conversations throughout the week, and they're two girlfriends talking. And so what I really enjoyed about today was just being able to sit back and listen to the two of you dialogue, listen to you share the knowledge that you shared. Cara came in with some comments and some questions. And so I'm just very grateful for you agreeing to join us today and sharing the knowledge that you had. It was definitely, a lot. And I think for me, one of the main things that I'm going to take away from it is I just want to increase my knowledge base. I think I'm I'm already subscribed to Audibles, but just reading more. And I'm moving towards the last chapters of my life, and just trying to look at what does that look like, and what else do I need to do, or what things do I need to change so that I can be in the place where I need to be. So therefore, I just want to thank you for joining, all the knowledge that you have imparted.
Well, thank you both. I really have appreciated this, and Charleena, it was a great opportunity to reconnect too, because we're going back and forth. We got the weirdest relationship. We hear from each other for every 3 to 6 months. We connect, sometimes longer. So I just want to thank you for that. I think if I had to say two things, man, and this is what the center of it is, you got to still your mind. You got to still your mind. And sometimes in order to do that, you got to, the reading, meditating, journaling, ways in which you separate yourself from the rest of the world to allow your inner voice to really have some space and not be influenced or directed by other people. I will leave you with a book title, and I've encouraged people to read this one. It was called The Power of Now. It came out several years ago, and it talks about, it's by Eckhart Tolle. Mm-hmm. And the reason I found a lot of comfort in that book, because it talked about how we do a number on each other, on ourselves, in that it talked about suffering and how the past is over. And so, but at the same time, we bring our suffering into our present, which in many ways damages our future. So all you have is the gift. There's a play on words, right? The gift is the present. So because the past is gone, the future is unknown, really. But what you have is this moment, and what you choose to do in it, how you choose to spend it. Like we were talking about strategy earlier. Is it about strategy? Is it about self-help? Is it about mental health for me? What is the most important thing? And it's not necessarily conspicuous in consumption. It's about those things that bring me value and bring me comfort. So I would just think that stillness and definitely check out this book, The Power of Now.
So thank you for that. I have Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, behind me.
I have that one too.
That's why I kept looking back. Like, is that The Power of Now?
Yeah, he's the same guy.
Yeah. I thought I had The Power of Now is what I'm saying, but I don't. I have his book, A New Earth.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, which I like dip in. I'm a sporadic reader. I'm reading this week. Oh, I'm reading a little bit from everything. And I've stopped trying to force myself to focus on one book at a time. I think that's not how my mind works. So,
I got you.
Okay, so in closing, while we were doing that, just had my own little, just quiet prayer and pulled a card from my Soul Journeys card, and look at the card I pulled.
Adversity.
How appropriate for us. I accept that challenges are the best way to learn. Nobody learns on the mountaintop, y'all. That's not where the lessons are. It says, no one ever said life was going to be easy. Obstacles are presented to you so that you may overcome them. Believe that you will, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. Confidence comes to those who have succeeded in conquering adversity, and then the next hurdle won't seem as daunting. Adversity is an opportunity for you to reach out to your soul family, which as Black people is all of us, right? You are not alone in this time of challenge. If you need help, others are waiting to offer assistance. This test may have come into your life to teach you to receive rather than to give. I just feel like this is so appropriate. And, there are people who think they don't have anyone. And that's not true. Like, there's always someone who is available to you, even if honestly you're a person who is constantly in need, right? There's still someone or some ones that are available. Just make sure, I would say, when it comes to that you're ready to be healed. It's just like the parable in the Bible, will thou be made whole? You have to choose to be better. You have to want to get out of the adversity or the challenge and not be in a pattern where you're constantly, worshiping your pain or feeling like you're always down. But these challenges that come into our lives test us, they prepare us. And then when we face the next difficult moment, we can look at the previous adversity and say, oh, I made it through that. I mean, Charleena knows I just went through a major trial and I hit rock bottom in that trial. And then I remembered, wait a minute, I was driving an Uber 6 years ago. I didn't think I'd ever be a homeowner again and have certain things. And so those adversities come. And if you don't let them take you all the way down where you're just spinning and spinning, you can come out of it even stronger. And we can do that as a people. And if you're a Black person, a descendant of slaves in America, do you understand? I don't know if I share this with you, Charleena, but I use this for strength all the time. Someone stayed on that boat. And that's why we're having this conversation. Someone could have jumped. Someone could have done any number of things could have happened, and you wouldn't be here right now. This is a very, very real thing. And because of the choice that they made and how much more adversity they faced, we can do better. And guess what? the adversity for some people right now is comfort. They're very comfortable with their job and their life. And so you may have to channel in a whole new way to get energy to join this fight because you're not struggling like an ancestor was. Adversity can come in all sorts of ways. And so that's my closing thought. I want us to close with our breath, but I'm also going to put in the comments a book, a movie, not movie, but a show that I think everyone should check out.
And put in the comments the book that Lorne recommended.
Okay. Charleena, talk for a second and close us on that while I type this because the typing takes over the audio. So I need to mute myself on 1 second. I feel like you have one more thing you could say while I type this.
No, I'm going to talk to Lorne. So Lorne, again, thank you so much for everything that you shared. As I said at the beginning, you did hear me say this, and I'm sure anyone who gets the opportunity to see this, they will also see what I have known about you for years and seen in you for years, just the brilliant mind that you have, and the beauty and the delivery of the message. You had no idea of what you were walking into when I asked you to do this, but you willingly agreed to do that. And you have been given a gift, and thank you for sharing that with all of us. And also just giving us some direction in terms of what our role is, what it is that we can do as individuals in this fight that we're in right now. To me, it almost feels like we are back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. It feels like that's where we are. But the game plan is interesting because I think the game plan that was implemented then, there's some principles of it that are relevant today, but I think how we implement it will be different because we are in a different time. We
Absolutely.
have different tools that we can use. And so I think maybe overall, we need to look at what was the foundation of the strategy that they used, and we need to marry that with the tools that we have today, and then that should be our marching orders.
I agree 100%, 100%. Because we do, and I'll say this and I'll shut up, but we do have more tools than we had before. You got a lot more tools than you had before.
We need to start by fixing ourselves. We need to start by fixing ourselves because that's going to fix it. Like all those points you made, we need to all individually do those things. And that will help us deal with the stress of everything else going on. We just need to tune that out and do our own ground game,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to point out the documentary there because Clotilda was the last slave ship to come over to the U.S. And I watched this maybe a week or so ago, and it was moving on so many levels. That's not the full title, but if you do a search for that in documentary, it'll tell you what streaming service it's on and everything. And it just tells the story of this family so all the people that came over on that ship, a lot of their ancestry stayed in this same town. I think it's in Mississippi. And so it was so moving about how this ancestor of theirs hundreds of years ago told this story on repeat so that in this generation, they still knew his story. And 5 years after they were brought here, slavery was abolished. And what does the first thing he wants to, I can't remember his name, but the first thing he wanted to do was go home, right? Wouldn't we all? I've been here 5 years. I was taken. And so his ancestors in today's generation took some soil from his gravesite or where the marker was and made a trip back to Africa, to the specific country that he came from, and did a ceremonial thing with the people there to reconnect him with the roots. It was beautiful. And there were also parts of it that were hard because when they tried to talk to the local king about why their ancestor was sold, it brought up this whole thing of the fact that there's accountability on all sides. Like there's a lot of white guilt around slavery, but there's guilt in Africa as well. But not all of us were kidnapped, or just willingly went on the boat. Some people were sold or given away. So the trauma is still over there as well. I hadn't thought about that part.
Mm-hmm.
I strongly encourage folks to check that out, to get a very holistic story, very healing. It made me say, that's it. I'm definitely doing my ancestry DNA. I want to know what country I'm most closely associated with and make that my priority. And then, Lorne, my plan is, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do this because of a lot of layers, but I want to take my children back to that country first class.
Mm.
My ancestors came over here. They were forced. They were in very uncomfortable, in a very uncomfortable setting. I want it to be symbolic that my children are riding in first class to go home, So, and they encourage you to read the book by Eckhart.
Awesome. Awesome.
So we're going to close with a breath. This is something that we do, Lorne, just to kind of help ourselves get centered and absorb all of this wonderful information. It's a very simple box breath. We make sure our spine is straight just so that the air is clear. And hold your, but not stiffen. You can let your shoulders relax a bit. I encourage everyone to close your eyes just because it helps you focus on yourself and kind of going within and not get distracted by anything around you. And we're going to do a very simple 4-4-4 breath where we inhale through the nose for 4, hold for 4, and then slowly release that breath. And we're giving thanks as we do this breath. We're giving so much gratitude for Lorne and for his intellectual knowledge. Lorne, I also offer you prayer in this moment for your journey. I feel like you have a tremendous purpose still to be fulfilled and unfolded. And so I offer you prayers of safety and security, that you may receive any support that you need as you move forward in this mission. I pray for the removal of all fear and doubt from your mind, from your heart. I pray that you receive proper alignment and that your journey through this be as much with ease as possible and less stress. I pray protection over you and your DEI initiatives with all that's going on, that your income actually flourish and increase and double beyond anything that you have in mind. That is what I'll be offering to you as we do this breath work today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You are most welcome. Okay, so we're going to close our eyes and just relax. Give yourself time to basically figure out kind of where your breath is right now and calm it down, and just be aware that you have breath in your body when so many people would have given anything to have a few more breaths. We're thankful. And just relax. If your stomach is tight, go ahead and loosen that up. Loosen up your shoulders and get ready. And we're going to inhale through the nose for 4, hold for 4, and exhale through our mouths for 4. And you are inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale through your mouth. And just relax. Give yourself a moment to relax in that. And then when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyelids and come back. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful episode. Thank you to my beautiful co-host, Charleena and Anita, for bringing us this wonderful guest today. I'm so grateful for you guys. We're going to have a great week. We have a great week in front of us. We have homework. So that's for the 3 of us, too. There may be something on that list we need to work on more. And for everyone, take one thing. Just don't get overwhelmed. Take one thing that you can start working on this week. All right?
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Hold on, Lorne. All right. Bye, everybody.